Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's CPHI China webinar. Today, we are talking developing biologics for the fastest growing patient population on Earth. China is the world's second largest pharmaceutical market, following the US, with a market share around 12% in global pharmaceutical sales in 2021 according to data from Statista. With an aging population and the rise of new indications, this population makes an attractive market for any biopharmaceutical company. Joining us for today's discussion are two industry experts from Thermo Fisher Scientific. First is Christy Eatman, Global SME for Sterile Drug Products, who is going to lead the discussion. Christy is joined by Yan Fang Ma, Vice President and General Manager of Thermo Fisher Scientific Hangzhou, China location. The webinar will be available on demand and you will get the link via email. So with all that said, I am going to turn it over to Christy now.
Good morning, good evening, afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. Let's just jump right into the questions. So thank you, Yan Fang, for joining us. My first question is, since most of our viewers are most likely US and EU based, they may not be familiar with the China market and the landscape in Asia. Can you just start by giving us some background on the biopharmaceutical industry in China?
Yes. China has been known as a big exporter of API, especially small molecules, in the past. But it seems China has not shown strength really in pharmaceutical or biopharmaceutical industry. So they have a few products to be exported to the Western world. And actually, the government have strong desire to transform the industry to more innovative, to high tech. So they want to move away from the generics. So they, since 2015, the government launched its 10-year Made in China 2025 initiative to establish the nation as a global leader in several biotech, high-tech industries, including biotechnology. And this is the area of a particular focus for many relatively rich regions, right? Namely, like a Yangtze River Delta. And so China continued to own its largest patient pool. And so that make China actually more determined with the aging population, make China more determined to take steps towards becoming a very competitive and high-value innovative farmer, and as compared to what it is today. Right?
Great, thanks. It's clear that the industry and the market's very dynamic. In your opinion, can you maybe give us some examples of how the market has evolved over the last maybe 5 years or so, and what makes China so attractive for biopharmaceutical companies? And, if you could talk a little bit about the regulations and government policies, economy, that would be fantastic.
Yes, sure. As the Miles just during his introduction, and Miles mentioned that China is the second largest pharmaceutical market, right? That basically takes up 12% of the global pharmaceutical sales. And with the aging population and the rise of new indications, China still makes a very attractive market for any biopharmaceutical company. Our look at this evolution of the China market from a few angles. Right? First, from government policy, biopharma especially remains the strategic focus for the three relatively rich regions in China that we call that what is that? The three delta actually, and So that the three delta areas count for close to 2/3 of China's exports in goods. So Yangtze River Delta actually is the biggest hub for biopharma, and basically it's a manufacturing powerhouse. And that's where Thermo Fisher Hangzhou site is. And the second one is the Pearl River Delta area. Then the third is the Beijing-Tianjin area. Right? And so biopharma industry also benefit a lot from regional local policy. As it's the local government try to align with the central government to encourage biopharma industry. So they come up with a duty exemption for imported equipment, which we benefit a lot. And also there are many talent attraction policies. And so far, the advanced biologic production involved like cell or gene therapy is quite limited to this Yangtze River area. And so Hangzhou is one of the hub as well. From regulation perspective, China is committed to continued regulation reforms. NMPA continue to reinforce accelerated approval of new drugs. And also China tried to align with an EMA on ICH standards. So China has implemented, at least it claims it has implemented about 70% of ICH standards, right? And also in recent years, China also showed higher acceptance of global clinical trial data. So that create incentives for MNC, like big pharma companies, to conduct early study in China. From economy perspective, we are facing a worldwide economic downturn. There's no exception for China. And the financial market is experiencing a cooling down in terms of financing the biotech companies. We estimate the cool down is about actually 23%. So some drugs, the innovation or development of new drugs is suffering due to lack of funding. That's basically a reality a lot of, especially small biopharma, is facing. It's a matter of survivability, right? And I think that's the overall. That's my take on the evolution of the market.
Okay. Thanks for that. Can you just briefly speak to how the culture's changed within the biopharmaceutical industry in recent years?
I think the two aspects. One thing is about the, I feel the overall industry is more, for the better word, is more westernized. And so it's more aligned with the business conduct in the West. I noticed the culture change, which is quite obvious. I think there are a few reasons because for that. One is a lot of MNC company, big pharma company, have their manufacturing site or have their headquarters in China. So their way of doing business also have impact on how the local industry conduct their business. The second is a lot of startup companies actually are owned or run by overseas Chinese who were trained or educated or trained in the West. So when they come back to the country to conduct business, I think obviously they bring the some discipline or business conduct to the country, right? That have impact on the operation culture as well. And also, China shows strong desire to catch up with the West in the biopharma industry. So they are willing, really have strong willingness to recognize, align with the principles of the West. For example, they show more respect for the IP and abidance to contractual agreement. They tend to more for the standardization of certain practice, especially like quality standard. All that show a big improvement in this industry. And also, it shows that I think the industry is become more rational. In the past, past years, it could be the word is overheated, right? A lot of money swamped in, and like in terms of decision making, in the past years, I think there's some lack of good decision. Now, I think with the market cooling down a little bit, I think the investors is also more cautious about where they put money. So there's better judgment in that.
Great, thanks for that. At the heart of what we do is always our patients, right? We're very driven by providing therapies for patients, and the pharmaceutical industry, certainly in the West, has been driven to develop many, many new drugs. We see a huge increase in biologics in development over, maybe the last 10 years. Can you talk a little bit about what the trends are in patient health in China and how that's driving the rise in biotechs there?
I think with better affordability of a large patient pool, and the main drive is derived from the unmet medical needs, and also the desire for the access to high quality medicine. I think the market is moving away from biosimilar or generics, and they prefer innovative and novel therapeutics and name brand drugs, right? And so from the aging population perspective, I think more therapeutic areas in demand are oncology, especially lung cancer or liver cancer, and immunology. Rare disease, that's worth mentioning because there's a big gap in the past years in the rare disease treatment field. I think the government published the designated rare disease list only in 2019. We're talking about 3 years ago, right? So this is actually area that is in there's a big gap that can be filled, right? And other areas, for example, anti-infection, cardio area, and that still have a lot of room for growth. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Now we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about actually manufacturing and developing drugs in China. So, Ms. Ma, the next series of questions are about actually manufacturing and developing pharmaceuticals in China. So can you start us off by just giving us some insight into what are the major challenges when developing a drug at the moment in China?
Okay, the major challenges I think is a 3 areas, and one is the geopolitical context, right? We all know there's some recent sensitivities, and I think especially when people facing such sensitivity, they don't necessarily know how to react, right? How to make a decision. And then also reimbursement policy. And also third will be the capability for true breakthrough innovation. That's the three biggest uncertainties you're facing when you try to enter China market. So I want to talk about reimbursement policy a little bit. I know probably a lot of you heard about volume-based procurement. Basically, the government put a lot of pressure on the pricing. And one thing they want to cut down the expenses or the medical care, right? In the past, due to some poorly designed policy, and that drive the medical costs extremely high in the past years. Now the government want to take some solid action to press down the price of medical treatment. So volume-based procurement is kind of a double-edged sword, and it's good for the patients. You cut down the price significantly. However, some cutting can be so significant that the industry face a lot of pressure. Basically, their profit margin is very minimal. That kind of discourage innovation in certain area, right? And so there's another thing is quite lacking is patient awareness of some, of our product or about the disease. And so the company are encouraged to or required to invest in patient education area as well. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers are specifically interested in manufacturing and development. So could you talk a little bit specifically about manufacturing changes or challenges itself?
We are, I think we are still suffering in China some lingering impact of COVID, right? We are facing long lead time of imported goods, and also the price jump on the equipment, on the material, especially the imported ones. And so for the raw material, yes, I think that there are certain raw materials are available locally. However, the quality could vary. So you have to know what you choose, right? So that's on the supply chain, it has been a challenge in the past 2 or 3 years. Then in terms of cost of goods, I think use like a locally sourced material and on the price aspect, the price, for example, the resins, you could find the price that 30% lower. However, the quality also vary. So you need to bear in mind of that. And for drug product aspect, the primary containers, some local source material can be 50% lower. So that is kind of a sign for the Western countries to be careful with the price of your components or material. Also on the cost of goods aspect is China is gradually losing its advantage on lower labor cost. It's no longer that low, right? And the people's wage are going up significantly in the past years. So China is also want to change its image of offering like a low labor, and they, like I mentioned, they want to move on to more innovative high-tech area. Right? From regulatory matureness aspect, I think one thing is to pay attention is China has a strong requirement to have DS and DP manufactured at the same site. That is kind of limiting the flexibility of pharma companies. So you cannot say for biologic products, you cannot say make DS in one country, then you import to China to make DP. That does not work, right? There's some discussion. So I know a lot of MNC companies try to persuade NMPA to change this policy to give industry some flexibility. There's some consideration, but so far the policy remains as it is. So there's another thing to pay attention is there currently on the market, there's excess biomanufacturing capacity because the market was overheated in the past year, I think 2 to 3 years. There's a lot of investment in capital investment. However, due to the recent economic cool down and there's many companies cannot continue their product development, so they have to cut their pipeline. So the capacity, so they try to utilize their excessive capacity. So there are certain companies, they hybrid or branch out to CDMO as well. So you can find quite a few companies. On the one hand, they claim they are innovative company. On the other hand, they also run CDMO business in parallel. Yeah, that's what the key, trend or challenges we are facing so far. Yeah,
in manufacturing. Yeah, I've heard for years, the concern about moving into China with lower costs, of course, but maybe lower quality with those. So it's good to hear that there is some balance there and some awareness of quality being an important aspect. Of course, that's the first aspect that we want to make sure we take good care of when making injectable products, right? So the path to commercialization or commercial tech transfer, as you mentioned, seems somewhat clear, especially for those big pharma companies. But what about for companies in clinical development? What are some considerations they need to make when entering in the China market?
I think in the past 2 or 3 years, I think once the COVID broke out in China, I think a lot of clinical studies, they face difficulties in recruiting patients and also delay of trials, right? But now it's improving with we're getting over the COVID situation. So I see this is could be gradually improved. There's some funding challenges because investors are more cautious, and also there's there's a price pressure in China, like stock market as well. So basically, there's less money in the early stage studies. We're also facing homogeneous competitions. So there's a tendency for, at least in the past few years, what we observed is the investors or some small biotech company, they just swarm in to the hot area. It's the hot target can be too crowded, and you can find many PD1 product on the market or in the company claim they have in their pipeline. There's in general lack of a differentiation. And so whatever the market sees popular, just many companies will go after the same target.
Right. We see that in the U.S. and Europe as well. So that's nice to know we're sort of all in the same boat. As you mentioned, there are a lot of PD1 products out there in development, early and late stage. So with that in mind, how should IP protection issues be addressed specifically for the Asian market?
I think China has improved significantly in IP protection, IP protection aspect. I think, for example, the government released the new patent law, and in June last year, like 2021, a lot of efforts have been made to raise the awareness, right? And so, I think it takes some time to build a trust from the Western countries, because the past practice or lack of awareness in the past. But I think it has been significantly improved. People are more more professional in this aspect. I certainly noticed it's a strong awareness of IP protection.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for that. And as we continue the discussion, maybe we can talk a little bit about the geopolitical situation in China and how that's impacting the biopharmaceutical industry. I know you touched on briefly about, all-inclusive in China, right? In China for China. But if you could kind of expand on that and maybe talk about out-licensing as well, just so that we can get a better picture of this kind of geopolitical stance in China, that would be great.
Obviously, in China for China is no longer enough. Obviously, China has its ambition and to go beyond the border, right? And I see two ways of pursuit of market. I think China biopharma companies, they have gained certain confidence, and then they really have an eye for the global market. They want to be recognized, want to seek revenue uplift, and by the Western countries. So how to do that? I see a more trend of out-licensing, and they partner up with the multinational big pharma companies, MNCs, and they also establish some due establishment of their either industrial or commercial capabilities. They can build a manufacturing site in parallel to their home-based company, and they also build a commercial office. They kind of build their commercial office in the West as well. They aim for the simultaneous submission for example, in US and in China. On the other hand, I think MNC companies, big pharma companies, they are moving away from the old days model, try to put a lot of capital investment in China or build their own R&D center in China. Instead, they prefer to partner up with the local company and then utilize this collaboration or cooperation and to let a local company drive their product, like either development or manufacturing. So that they view this as a more like a sustainable model, let local drive the local business. But they benefit from partnership, right? So these are the two trends we notice on the China market. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. And it does seem like the the Chinese pharmaceutical industry is eager, right? Eager to, as you mentioned, kind of like catch up with the West and really do things in a new way. With that in mind, what do you think the rest of the world can learn from the Chinese way of doing things?
First of all, China's speed. I feel, I came from big pharma before, and so in the West, you feel the Western countries, especially big pharmas, they're just too comfortable. And so they underestimate how fast China industry can develop. They can progress. So I see in China, you kind of experience the Chinese people can learn fast, move fast. They can do fast. Also, they can change fast as well. So they are very adaptable to any situational changes, and they are willing to put a tremendous efforts to make things happen. I think this is a particular spirit that the Western country need to learn from China. Don't underestimate how fast even biopharma, you see China biopharma is still relatively behind, but don't underestimate how fast China pharma can catch up with the West. And another thing is I feel is exactly because of the sense of insecurity of a China pharma company that actually gives them more drive to explore any possible new solutions. The drive is so strong. And so basically you will not be able to score if you only play defense, right? I think back to the IP protection topic is the same thing. Is your IP is don't, how to say, for example, let's use the example of iPhone. Yeah, iPhone was the first developed by by Apple, but now look at the market, how many type of iPhone device are out there, right? And don't feel so secure. I think people can catch up, can figure out, and can innovate, can go beyond as well. So I feel that's something I would advise Western companies to pay attention to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Balancing the risk with the reward, right? You tend to be more conservative here. And we have really, I think the West has really changed in the COVID response on how to develop things rapidly, but certainly there's a lot we can learn from the Chinese way of doing things quickly, keeping quality in mind, and really adapting and just being very eager, right? I think that's something we can learn from the Chinese, culture, is just being very eager, very excited to develop new things, and keeping quality and patient centricity right at the focus. Let's switch gears again and talk a little bit about the CDMO world in China. We mentioned it briefly. Obviously, we're in the CDMO space in China. So from your perspective, if you could just share some factors that biotech companies need to keep in mind when choosing a CDMO partner, and how to choose the right partner for the China market.
I believe when it comes to choosing CDMO, I believe all companies have their own matrix or Excel sheet built up for CDMO evaluation. For China market, just on top of your Excel sheet, I would mention a few things you need to pay attention to. First of all, the CMC, the whole aspect of CMC, right, is relatively new in China. So you can find a lot of startup company, they don't really have the CMC expertise. And basically, quite often, they don't know what to do. They are looking for your advice. So they rely on CDMO to provide advice to guide them through, even through submission. So it's a big advantage if a company, a CDMO, is strong in providing regulatory support and give advice to the clients. The second aspect is be careful with the quality system. And I think it's important to choose a brand like you are familiar with the quality system. And you will see some local companies, they just don't have a system. They can have a bunch of SOPs, but they don't have a well-established system to manage, especially for the materials and raw material selection or vendor control. You can see some aspects are quite missing in some companies. Also, back to IP topic, be careful in choosing company to avoid conflict interest. Like the type of company I mentioned, they have one thing, on the one hand, they are innovative. On the other hand, they run in parallel a CDMO, right? We view that as a conflict interest. And so be careful, do your homework when you select company, know like the ownership of the company, the funding of the company, so do more thorough work in investing in the company. Also another thing is to avoid CDMOs that readily overcommit. Basically, whatever you desire, anything for you, we can do it much cheaper, much faster, just ridiculously cheap. I think be careful with that. When you see things like too good to be true, quite often it's not true. So be careful with those companies.
Right. That's true, and a lot more than just pharmaceutical. Right? If it's too good to be true, it might not be true. So thanks for those points to look out for. And just as you're responsible for our new site in Hangzhou, maybe you could just talk a bit about why Thermo is invested in this strategic site and what we can offer there to our customers at the Hangzhou site.
Obviously China is a big market, and the CDMO business is also big market in China, especially with the booming biotech industry. Certainly, Thermo Fisher want to have a bite on the apple as well. I think Hangzhou site is well positioned as a gateway to and from China, right? For company who want to enter China market, or local company want to go beyond China to export to the West. So because Thermo Fisher in Hangzhou site is a part of the global network, and so we have a true advantage to help the customers to bring their product either way. And our Hangzhou site is also fully integrated site. We have a process development, have drug substance manufacturing, drug product manufacturing. So basically, we can provide the whole range of services end to end. Being part of the global network, we got also very strong support from the network. So that's another advantage. And also, we use a lot of our own product. So we consider that internal supply of, for example, equipment, lab supplies, so that will minimize our risk of a supply chain aspect. So basically, yes, I think we are confident we will be very successful in China market. It's a brand new plant. We're open for business, obviously. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Ma, for these great insights. And I think from my perspective, one of the great things about the site is that a lot of what we're doing there is equivalent to what we have in the US and in the EU. So customers that are looking to really branch out and launch commercial products in all markets, we have that ability to really do a similar for similar. I don't want to say like for like because there might be some differences, but similar for, process and really make the same sort of products across the globe. So we'll move now to some question and answer time. And there are a few different questions here that I'm going to try to lump together as best I can. So a couple people have asked about the requirement for drug substance and drug product to be made in the same facility as a regulation in China. So if you can just clarify, is that still a regulation? Does it apply to clinical and commercial products? And does it apply to products only being distributed in China or, rest of the world as well? So if you could just sort of clarify the requirement there for DS and DP at the same facility.
Yeah, the requirement is for biological product, not for small molecule. And also for clinical early stage, you don't have to be like at the same site. DSDP can be like a separate site. But for product aiming for phase 3 and commercial, the DSDP have to be at the same site. Yeah.
Thanks I hope that clarifies it for those in the audience who asked those questions. There were a few with that sort of kind of underlying question. You talked a little bit about biosimilars and regulations. Can you also touch on a little bit on what the regulatory strategy would be for an NCE compared to a biosimilar?
Well, I have to say I'm not particularly familiar with the biosimilar product.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can look into that and respond later.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question here about ICH guidelines. I think you mentioned that China's adopted 70% of the ICH guidelines. Is there a plan to adopt the rest of the ICH guidelines to be completely compliant with ICH, and what's the timeline for that? And I would think in our facility we can probably meet ICH, but if you can just touch on that as well, on the ICH guidelines.
Yeah. Yes, I think China is a member of ICH now, and I think it takes time for China to fully adopt, to implement ICH standard, right? But it's getting there. It's moving fast as well. I don't know the exact timeline, but however, I would think in a few years, China will be fully in compliance with ICH. For Thermo Fisher Hangzhou site, as we are part of a global network, we follow global quality system and the standard. We are fully compliant with the ICH guideline. So we're aiming for our product to actually to meet the requirement for both the FDA and the EMA and the China regulations.
Right, thanks. And another question, maybe there might be one or two left here. We did touch on supply chain issues and how, we have the kind of luxury of using Thermo Fisher supplied materials at times. Certainly not for everything, right? We don't make our own glass or, things like that. So can you touch on maybe what the timelines are currently, for the tech transfer process and how Hangzhou has been impacted by supply chain issues, if there are any? If not, that's great. But just touch on a little bit more in depth on actually how it has impacted timelines for tech transfers.
So far, for Hangzhou site, we are not seeing significant impact on the tech transfer. As most, there are certain, for example, delay on the equipment, and but I think we're not experiencing significant delay, but in general, I heard other companies, for example, some consumables can take up to 6 to 8 months to order. That's a much longer lead time. So I think this issue could be temporary. I think in a few months, once we get over the COVID, probably things will get better. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, 6 to 8 months sounds very short for me personally, because of what the timelines have been here for the last few years. Yeah, so 6 to 8 months is actually pretty short compared to what we're seeing in U.S. and Europe. So, so that's great. I think we might have time for one more question. Let me just, look through here. And there was a question just about the site in general. Can you just, you said you're open for business, just confirming that we can take on new programs right now for DS, right? And then if you can touch on the timeline for DP as well. Just confirm the timeline for one of our viewers here.
The DP, I think we will be fully ready in Q2 next year. And so currently we are going through qualification of filling line. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, one last question here. I'm just going to read the question verbatim because I'm not sure exactly how to summarize it. But this person says, we're interested in developing drugs in China. Have heard that regulatory agencies might be stricter to register drugs in China than other markets. So from your perspective, is that true? And how does it impact registering a biopharmaceutical in China from a CMC perspective?
I'm not quite clear about this question. So it's talking about early stage product?
I think so. From the question, it seems like early stage. And there's another question here, just to clarify also about DS and DP at the same facility. You did say that first in human does not need to be from the same facility. It's just for phase 3 and beyond. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's it for questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Christy and Yan Fang Ma. This was an entertaining webinar, and I hope everyone in our audience got as much information as you need. If you have any questions, you are welcome to reach out via the contact information on the screen. We will follow up to get your questions answered. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Have a nice day, and we will see you next time. Bye.